And WION Gound Jessica Taneja gets you the latest from the ground. Take a look.
It's been almost 9 years when Allahabad High Court had come up with a historic judgment in which it had distributed the land equally among the three parties. And now in 2019, the Apex Court has had a different ruling altogether. The Apex Court has said that the Muslim parties will be given a separate 5-acre land to build a mosque, wherein the disputed site will come under a trust overseen by the centre. One will only have to wait and see on how this pans out across India while the legal remedies for the parties still await. Jessica Taneja with video journalist Shekhar, World is One in New Delhi.
Well, I have two special guests joining me on this discussion. Sumanth C, Raman, a senior journalist, and Lord Meghnad, Desai, author and Professor Emeritus at the London School of Economics. Thank you both for joining us on Beyond World is One. If I can go to Sumanth C, Raman first. Sumanth C, Raman, your thoughts on the implications of this historic Ayodhya verdict in terms of legal precedent and politics on the ground going forward as well?
Yeah, I think first of all, we need to read the full judgment, 1045 pages. So that's going to take the better part of today to sort of digest what actually are the reasons for the final adjudication, as it were. But I think there is an overwhelming sense
I'm afraid we've lost that link with Sumanth C. Raman in Chennai, but we'll fix that line momentarily. This is the top news we are focusing on beyond Lisbon. Sumanth C. Raman, I'm told, is back with us. Sumanth C. Raman, apologies for that poor audio connection. Let's get back to the question I was asking you. Your first thoughts on the implications of this judgment going forward in terms of law and politics.
Okay, first of all, I think that we need to read the full 1045 pages of the judgment before we can actually comment with authority on it. But initially, at least, it seemed we need to first understand what are the specific reasons for the verdict handing over the entire 2.77 acres of land to the Hindu community, vis-a-vis the judgment of the Allahabad High Court, which actually had divided it into three. Now, the second part is, politically, there is an overwhelming sense of wanting to move on among both communities. And I think that that is hopefully what will prevail, and people will just move on from this so that we can put it behind us and get on with our lives. And thankfully, so far, things have remained quite peaceful, and we hope that that will continue. But I think this seems to be more a judgment on which we will have to go into the details to really understand the reason why this final decision was made and on what evidence or basis it was decided that the entire 2.77 acres must be handed over to the Hindus.
Absolutely. Lord Meghnad Desai, Sumanth C. Raman says that we have to wait to read the fine print of the judgment first before coming to any conclusion. But he makes a point that, he says that this will finally bring some closure because the timing may have been propitious in terms of politics in India.
I think the timing, but also there is a certain kind of rough balance. I'm not a lawyer, but I basically think that the Shia Waqf Board case was dismissed.
Right.
The Nirmohi Akhada was dismissed. So clarity, it's a dispute between two sides. Now, and something has been given to both sides. Now, obviously, the Babri Masjid historic site is now confirmed as a Ram temple site. But the Sunni board has been given 5 acres. Now, you could say, no, I'm going to appeal and try and, because what the court was saying in earlier part of the judgment, I heard that the outer courtyard was controlled by the Sunnis. The inner courtyard was the Ram Lalla court. So that clearly was a thing, but the inner courtyard is much bigger than the outer courtyard. So, and since there is already a structure there, it makes sense to have a Ram temple structure there.
Sure.
And the court said, we are not disputing religion, we are only disputing possession.
Absolutely.
And so this is, I think, a good conciliatory judgment, and all sides should say, thank you, and just go.
Indeed.
Don't prolong this dispute anymore.
Sure.
People are fed up.
Sure. Sumanth C. Raman, Lord Meghnad Desai in my studio says this is it. The aggrieved parties should not push it and accept its judgment in good faith. But coming back to another point, now you mentioned that you may have some reservations on the import of the judgment, in particular relating to the so-called disputed site of in Ayodhya, the 2.77 acres. But at the same time, some would say the court has been more than fair and balanced. Why? Because on the one hand, the court says that there was no proof that a temple was destroyed to build a mosque, number one. But at the same time, the court says that the demolition of the Babri Mosque in 1992 was illegal. So, to that extent, the court seems to have played a rather balancing act. Would you say?
I'm not able to understand the rationale which goes there. So, if the installation of the idol in 1949, if that was wrong, if the demolition of the masjid was also unlawful, as the Honorable Supreme Court has clearly said, and thereafter it is not fully established conclusively by the ASI that what existed below was a temple, and the fact that it was a matter of faith that Lord Ram was born there. Now, how on the basis of what claim to the title is the entire area being handed over is something that we'll have to read the judgment about to try to understand it, because on the face of it, the trend of what we heard in the first 20-25 minutes of the judgment being read out,
right,
and the final decision, they weren't to me in sync, because I honestly at one point I thought that they were going to sort of divide this land itself into two or three different parts, as the Allahabad High Court had done earlier, and give it in some proportion or the other. But the basis for which this entire land was treated as one entity, and on what basis the title itself was decided, I think we'll have to read the judgment.
Now, Sumanth C. Raman, in the first proper reaction from the All India Muslim Personal Law Board, we just heard Zafar Yab Jilani just moments ago. Now, he says they are dissatisfied with some of the findings of the Supreme Court, number one, and number two, he says he's not satisfied and that this judgment was not as per their expectations. That's one side of the argument. On the other hand, we have someone like Justice R.S. Sodhi, who told us a short while ago that there are two options available to the aggrieved parties. One, a review petition, and two, a curative petition. But he says, for all practical purposes, this is it, and that all parties must go on from here and not look back, so to speak, at the veracity of the judgment, so to speak. So where do you stand on this issue?
No, I think that for one of the major concerns of the Muslim community in particular is that this should not then move to other places where mosques have been built. Already in the earlier years, there's been talk of other places. Dr. Swami has spoken about places like Kashi, Mathura, and so on. So I think that their concern primarily is to see that even if the land on which the Babri Masjid existed, is ceded and a Ram temple is built, that this issue is brought to a close here and it does not move to other places. Now, as long as, and Mr. Jilani did mention that there are some parts of the judgment which appear to indicate that that may not be possible, which is welcome. So I think the issue is, if it ends here, I think people would like to move on, both communities would like to move on, and that is how I think it should be. This judgment should not open up a Pandora's box. If it brings closure to the Ram Janmabhoomi Babri Masjid dispute, that would be most welcome.
And I want to ask both of you a question now. We've seen three issues on the BJP agenda for many, many years now. Article 370, Ram Temple, and Uniform Civil Code. Lord Meghnad Desai, two gone, one more to go?
Yes, but the third one is quite complicated, because Hindus may not be for Uniform Civil Code either. So we have to be very sensitive about and of course, there are many minor religions also involved. So I think it is in the Constitution as a directive principle of state policy. So one generation of legislators thought it was a desirable thing to do. I think we ought to pursue it, because there should be no doubt that we are all citizens of India. Sure. And we are all subject to the same civil code.
Absolutely. Sumanth C. Raman, where do you stand on this issue, politically speaking, given the fact that the government has ticked two of the three issues, Article 370 and Ram Temple? So where do you stand on the third issue of the Uniform Civil Code?
I don't have an iota of doubt that that is the next on the agenda for them, for the BJP. The key part really is, and in fact, I've spoken to many members of the minority community, and they have said, look, the issue of Uniform Civil Code is being opposed strenuously by them, primarily because it is sort of being perceived as an attempt to, to impose the Hindu Civil Code. Now, they say that, having a group of religious scholars from different communities, give them a year's time, form this kind of all religion, all communities together, give them some time and ask them to work out a framework which is acceptable to all communities. And I think if the government does that, that can go through quite, without the kind of huge, of course there will be issues. I mean, there will be cases where, the communities may not accept what those scholars have said and so on. But overall, that would be seen to be fair, rather than the government impose a particular code without getting the consensus from the different communities. So if the consensus is got, I don't think that there should be too many problems on that.
All right, Sumanth C. Raman and Lord Meghnad Desai, do hold your thoughts. I want to take a moment or two to bring some reactions for your benefit. Now, historic judgment from the Apex Court today on the disputed Ayodhya land. Let's have a look at the first reactions coming in post the judgment.
देखिए, ऐसा है ना कि हम इससे पहले भी कहते हैं कोर्ट ने जो भी कहा है वो ठीक कहा है, हम उसका सम्मान करते हैं। ये जिम्मेदारी सरकार की, हम वो कहा देती है, कहा नहीं देती है, क्योंकि हम कोर्ट का सम्मान करते हैं, पहले भी करते थे, आज भी करते हैं। हमें चाहते हैं ये मसला हिंदुस्तान का बहुत अहम था, वो आज खत्म हो गया।
The Indian National Congress respects the verdict of the Supreme Court in the Ayodhya case. We appeal to all the parties concerned and to all communities to abide by the secular values and the spirit of fraternity enshrined in our Constitution and to maintain peace and harmony.
मैं मानता हूं कि सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने जो आज ये फैसला दिया है वह एक ऐतिहासिक फैसला है, और इस फैसले के संबंध में मैं ये भी कह सकता हूं कि यह इतिहास का एक लैंडमार्क जजमेंट है। सहज रूप से सभी को इसे स्वीकार करना चाहिए, और मैं ये भी मानता हूं कि इससे सर्वधर्म समभाव की भावना भी और अधिक मजबूत होगी, और साथ ही साथ सामाजिक ताना बाना भी इसके परिणाम स्वरूप मजबूत होगा, ऐसा मेरा विश्वास है। और मैं जनता से भी ये अपील करूंगा कि सभी शांति और सौहार्द बनाए रखने का प्रयत्न अपनी तरफ से करेंगे, और इस जजमेंट को पूरे धैर्य और उदारता के साथ सभी को स्वीकार करना चाहिए।
जो निर्णय दिया है वो लोकतांत्रिक देश होने के नाते सबने उसको स्वीकार करना चाहिए, और शांति और सद्भाव वही कायम रखना चाहिए। सभी लोग शांति और सद्भाव कायम रखें, यही मेरी प्रार्थना है।
आज जो फैसला दिया है वो अयोध्या विवाद के एक महत्वपूर्ण पहलू पर सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने देश के सामने अपना निर्णय सुनाया है। ये निर्णय सबको सम्मान के साथ स्वीकार करना चाहिए, और इसके साथ ये प्रयत्न होना चाहिए कि इस आदेश की, इस निर्णय की दृष्टि जो जिस तरफ है उसका भी पालन ठीक से किया जाना चाहिए।
All right, so reactions were more or less on expected lines. Sumanth C. Raman, would you agree with me? And how much of resonance would this historic Ayodhya verdict have in southern India, from where you come in?
No, I don't think that the verdict would have any huge impact in southern India. I think people, by and large, wanted to move on both communities. And you must remember that even at the height of the Ram Janmabhoomi agitation, there was hardly a big impact in southern India. In fact, the even the bricks for the Kar Seva being sent from different parts of the country, that also had quite a subdued reaction in southern India. So I don't anticipate, except in small pockets in maybe 1 or 2 states, I don't anticipate any significant emotional response in any area. I think that as far as possible, people have sort of come to terms with this quite some time back, and I think they would like to move on. But again, the larger question is to go into the nitty-gritty of the judgment and try to find out why it has been given in the way it has been given.
Lord Meghnad, Desai, Sumanth C. Raman says that this issue may not have that much traction down south, but at the same time, as someone who divides his time between New Delhi and London, how do you think the world will react to this historic Ayodhya judgment?
I think the world will heave a sigh of relief. They will see that despite the idea that Modi is a divider-in-chief and the world is worried about the treatment of Muslims in India, they will say, no, this is a fair judgment, because although the old mosque has been converted into a temple, we don't know whether before the old mosque there was something else. Give benefit of doubt and then have a separate mosque constructed, sure, which I think will be thought to be quite generous.
Absolutely.
And I think you could complain, if you wanted to complain, that the mosque has been moved. But then the mosque was destroyed already, so what can you do? And I think that recognizing that destroying the mosque was an illegal act was a very important thing the Supreme Court said.
All right, I'm told we have a tweet coming in from India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi at this point in time. He says, and I quote here, "This decision of the Supreme Court is important for several reasons. It shows how important it is to follow the legal process in resolving a dispute. Each side was given enough time and opportunity to present its arguments. The Temple of Justice resolved the decades-old case amicably," unquote. This is coming in from Narendra Modi, India's Prime Minister. All right, let's stay on this tweet one more time. I'll read it out for the benefit of viewers who might just be tuning in. He says, and I quote, "This decision of the Supreme Court is important for several reasons. It shows how important it is to follow the legal process in resolving a dispute. Each side was given enough time and opportunity to present its arguments. The Temple of Justice resolved the decades-old case amicably," unquote. Right, so on that note, if I can go to my guest in Chennai, Sumanth C. Raman, one more time. Sumanth C. Raman, I'm sure you'll agree that this is a historic day, a landmark judgment. Would you say that this verdict has changed Indian politics forever?
I don't think so. I think that, this might have sort of brought closure to one major chapter in Indian politics, but I don't think that this is this is completely closed, this is completely transformed Indian politics. I also have just one point. I wonder, had the Babri Masjid not been demolished and it continued to stand there, what would the judgment have been? Would it have been the same, which in effect would have meant demolishing the mosque? I don't know. These are all questions that are hypothetical. But I'm just what I saw. A lot of people had commented along these lines on social media. But again, it's a very interesting angle to it. What would have been the judgment had the mosque not been demolished? And the demolition of the mosque was deemed to be an illegal act, clearly by the court. So I think we can go on. I mean, the debating the pros and cons of the judgment can be done for eternity. But I think everybody wants to move on, bring a closure to this, and get on with our lives, focus on issues of day-to-day existence now for the people.
All right, get on with the lives, says Sumanth C. Raman. And in the meantime, another tweet has come in from Prime Minister Modi. He says, and I quote here, "This decision will further strengthen the confidence of the common man in judicial processes. In accordance with the spirit of brotherhood of thousands of years of our country, we have to introduce peace and restraint to 130 crore Indians, to introduce the underlying spirit of India's peaceful coexistence," unquote. Lord Meghnad Desai, your thoughts on the Prime Minister's two tweets?
I think, the first tweet was very interesting because he said people have taken to the path of law. Now, who was not going to take the path of law? The Vishwa Hindu Parishad. So BJP must be relieved beyond belief that their people did not cause riots. And during the election campaign, they were seriously worried that these guys are going to get out of control and do some hangama in Ayodhya. So they started an illegal thing, Advaniji's Rath Yatra, all that. That has now been finished by a legal process. And using the word the temple of justice, this one is a master of communication. It's a temple which is now legalized a temple. And so he's very sensitive about how people interpret it. And I think, ultimately the BJP says, okay, let's all be brothers and happy together. Nobody has won, nobody has lost. The winners always say that.
Absolutely.
And I think we have to see whether there is any stronger reaction on the Muslim side than what the Personal Law Board said.
Absolutely.
I mean, they're reasonable people. We'll see whether the Sunni Waqf Board or the Shia Waqf Board. I mean, there must be somebody unhappy, and we should at least have that expressed. In the interest of democracy, we should have all opinions expressed.
Sure. All right, on that note, I want to thank my guest in Chennai, Sumanth C. Raman. Thank you, Sumanth C. Raman, for joining us on Beyond Bulletin. Appreciate it.